Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Kia ora, Bolt fam. It's the director. Chargers fans, man, has my inbox been getting blown up since last night? Revolving around this situation unfolding in Chicago. Number 58, like you're seeing here on the screen now, Roquan Smith, one of the very best linebackers in the NFL, may be on the move. He wants out. He wants a new contract. And you know what? This presents yet another very interesting scenario for the Chargers, who may be able to bolster this already ridiculous defense. And you know what? We've already made a trade with Chicago this season. Remember that big trade with Khalil Mack? That dialogue has been opened. There's communication between those two teams. Could another big trade be in the works? At this point, you really have to consider it, right? Because there are so many dots, right, that connect the Chargers to Roquan Smith that it's almost impossible not to link the two from several different angles. So the question in my mind, though, is this something that the Chargers could realistically pull off, right? Is there enough money? Is there enough cap space, especially when you consider that we already have mega contracts on the table, right? With Derwin James and then soon thereafter, Justin Herbert. Those are the priority right now. And most importantly, in my mind, would this be a move that would propel the Chargers into maybe the number one defense in the NFL conversation? Because in the end, if a trade doesn't make crystal clear sense, the incentive of the payoff, the risk to reward, if that doesn't make crystal clear sense, it's not worth pursuing. So we're going to try to get to the bottom of a lot of these questions today, see if it makes sense for the Chargers to pursue, and maybe try to get to the bottom if this is at least even a little bit realistic to think that Roquan could be in powder blue in 2022. Before we do get started, guys, question in the comments, because this is kind of an important one. You can maybe answer this as we go, because a lot of information is going to be presented on it. What is the highest compensation you'd be willing to part with in order to get Roquan Smith in powder blue today? And this could be answered, including, the draft picks the Chargers would have to forfeit in order to trade for Roquan Smith, as well as how much we would be paying him annually, because again, the Chargers are a little bit tight in the financial area right now. Before we do kick off, guys, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this Chargers content. The small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into this one. Lights, camera, action. Roquan Smith to the Chargers. Could it happen? Should it happen? And would this be a bold leap to the number one defense and in the NFL? Let's get started here with our first topic. The Roquan hype train is boarding. Make sure you have your passes in hand. Man, as of right now, you'll find many different NFL fan bases really want Roquan on their squad. When I was doing my research, it seems that every single team has a beat writer talking about adding Roquan to their squad, including the Bears, who do not want to let him go. And this is because of a few things in terms of, Roquan Smith, the player, right? For one, Roquan is young, right? And he's a proven young talent, only 25 years old. He's got a lot of tread left still on the tires right now, and honestly could evolve into something very special for any organization that wants to bring him in. Secondly, of course, it's going to be due to his talent, right? Again, he's a proven young talent at the position, because in my mind, at the very worst, he's a top 10 linebacker in the league, right? And it's not just his talent, it's his skill set, what he brings to the position of linebacker. Because he's one of very few linebackers in the league right now that can sort of do it all, right? It's very difficult to find a linebacker that can offer great run support, pass rushing, as well as, and maybe most importantly, great coverage skills, right? And Roquan Smith definitely checks every single one of these boxes. He's a very, very talented young player. And you know what? In being so young, he would still have plenty of time to continue leveling up in a new setting, in a new system, in a new environment. The Roquan Smith of the Bears could look completely different to the Roquan Smith of, let's say, the Seahawks or, the Patriots or even the Chargers. And that could actually end up being a very good thing, because there's no doubt that Roquan is the very best player on the trade block right now, and it's one that every single team at least has one eye on at the moment. Now, to kind of explain what's going on here, right? Drama in the Windy City. Why does Roquan want out, right? Why does Roquan Smith want to leave the city of Chicago, which he has stated is one of the best, things of his life right now? He wants to stay in Chicago. Well, like many situations in the NFL regarding a player move, a player trade, it comes down to money, right? And Roquan is one of the best in the league, certainly when it comes to the skill set that he brings to linebacker, and he wants to be paid that way. He wants that to be reflected in what he brings to the team. And right now, he's used the words that he doesn't feel very valued in Chicago, and maybe there is a little bit of logic behind that, right? The issue here, for one, in terms of, maybe getting him paid, staying in Chicago, is that the league doesn't really value linebackers like the way they used to, right? They've almost become the running back of the defensive side of the ball. It just feels like when you throw out that kind of money, it doesn't really work out most of the time. And the Bears seemingly definitely feel maybe in somewhat the same way. And secondly, it seems the Bears, probably even a bigger point to be made here, is that the Bears are going through a big transition right now, right? They've got a brand new head coach in Matt Eberflus. And what he wants to do is switch the team from a 3-4 defense, which they've been playing for the longest time, into a 4-3 defense in 2022. And that's going to shake things up in terms of how you utilize players, the talent that they bring at certain levels. Chargers fans certainly know this, as we did change from 4-3 to 3-2, or I should say 3-4, a couple of years back. Now, while I think this could actually be good for Roquan Smith in the long run, I think he would actually fit very well in a 4-3 scheme. It's also uncharted and kind of risky waters for Chicago with a player that's looking to be extended right now. On his fifth-year option, Roquan wants an extension. I think he's getting something like $9.75 million in 2022 on his fifth year. He wants to have that security right now. But Chicago feels the need to wait, and honestly, it's kind of warranted. If they're going to be changing schemes, they want to see how he fits in there. They want to see if he can remain consistent. If he doesn't, it's probably better for him to find an environment that better fits his skill set. The Chargers definitely are one of those teams that do fit what he's been doing good in an environment that he's been doing good in for a long time. So following the dotted line to LA, right? There are many, even outside of our fan base, that believe LA is one of the best destinations for Roquan Smith at the present time. And yes, it's impossible to deny that there are a ton of connections here, okay? First, the Chargers and Bears, they do have a pre-existing trade dialogue this season already, right? We traded for Khalil Mack for a very reasonable third-round pick this year. That was a big, big dub, especially on the side of the Chargers. The biggest reason I feel like Chicago settled for a third-round pick is likely due to Khalil Mack's large contract. They needed to free up some money. We could be in a similar situation here with Roquan Smith, not with money spent already, but future money that could be spent that they want to avoid. Now, secondly, with the Bears switching schemes, right? It would make the most sense to me, actually, for him to join a system that he's familiar with. And that's kind of been the mantra for the Chargers offseason this year. The Chargers not only run the same scheme, but perhaps maybe even a step above that, right? An elevated version of that. With the Bolts, Roquan would live in a world that's both familiar and improved, if that makes sense. His game would have every chance in the world to not only remain consistent with his high level of play in Chicago, but also greatly build and improve on that because of how Brandon Staley is taking what's familiar with the Vic Fangio system and continuing to let it evolve. So this is a great situation. LA is a great situation for Roquan. And then there is the Staley factor. It feels like Brandon Staley is kind of forming his own Avengers in LA, right? He's been recruiting players that he's head coached in the past, or I should say coached in the past, right? That understand the system that he's implemented in Los Angeles almost exclusively. These are like the only players that he's been looking to add to the Chargers team this year, be it very high-level players, but players that already have an understanding of what he wants to accomplish. And having even coached Roquan in Chicago, these guys already have a pre-existing relationship. And even speaking of pre-existing relationships, like you're seeing here on the screen with Khalil Mack and Roquan Smith, the Chargers already have, ex-teammates of Roquan on here in Khalil Mack and Bryce Callahan, might I add to that, which is very nice. It brings a lot more familiarity. And lastly, the Chargers, I would say maybe even the biggest point to be made in connecting Roquan to the Chargers is the need at linebacker at this point, right? Linebacker is without a doubt the biggest need on this loaded defense. And you could make a case, right? You can make a case for Kyle Van Noy, Drew Tranquill, Kenneth Murray being a very strong 3 to rotate at the position. But the biggest issue right now with that position is health. Because 2 out of those 3 players are kind of shaky at best, right? Tranquill and Murray right now are not participating in practice because of injury concern. Murray's recovering from surgery. Tranquill's recovering from an on-field thing. Doesn't sound too serious, but even then, the history of these players kind of makes that position a little unstable. And finding a bona fide star to fill that position would give the Chargers an insanely complete defense, right? Every single level would have some of the best talent in the NFL filling those spots, which is very, very nice. So lots and lots of connections to the Los Angeles Chargers, and this is why I'm hearing so much hype about the Chargers, at least considering number 58 being added to the roster very, very soon. So let's kind of get into the meat and potatoes of it, right? Roquan on the Bolts. And the consequences thereof, the positive consequences thereof for the most part. So what if Roquan joins the Chargers, right? What are we looking at? Why is this being, blown up to be so big? Well, it's because it does carry a lot of very big potential. As we stated before, the linebacker core, in my opinion, doesn't look great right now. It looks good, but it's mainly those health concerns that are holding me back. If you threw Roquan in the mix, though, like right now, today, and he started practicing with this team, things start to look absolutely nuts, all right? What would it look like with Roquan? Well, first, I want to reiterate what the Chargers are doing on defense. It's a little bit different. We kind of alluded to it a moment ago. The Chargers are a 3-4 team, right? Just like the environment that Roquan's been living in for several years now. But we kind of do use that loosely. You will still see shades of, let's say, multiple, where they do run a little bit of 4-3-3-4. You'll see unique formations, but most of all, you're going to see a lot of defensive backs, like 80% of the time on the field for the Chargers. Brandon Staley wants to get these DBs very, very involved, close to the line of scrimmage, and honestly, it's been looking very, very good in camp. Whatever he's doing on defense in terms of creativity, in terms of getting the DBs involved, it feels like it's working. And this means the Chargers will likely see at least one defensive back, let's say, in the box for most snaps. And we've got the personnel to pull that off. But still, that doesn't change the fact that there's going to be plenty of instances where we're going to need one, if not both, our linebackers on the field. So where would this leave Roquan Smith with the Chargers? Well, first off, I assure you that he would be on the field for most snaps for the Bolts. Because having a linebacker that is so good in almost every situation, this allows you to keep him out there no matter what, right? He's big, he's fast, he's one of the best in the league in coverage for linebackers. Staley would likely still feature DB-heavy looks, but you'd have a linebacker playing at an extremely high level kind of in between them, if that makes sense. So just imagining, guys like Derwin James and Roquan patrolling the middle of the field together is absolutely disgusting, and that's the kind of potential we're talking about. Furthermore, Roquan brings the ultimate hybrid defender to the table, right? Yes, you can line him up outside if you want. Let's say, you blitz him on the same side as a Joey Bosa or Khalil Mack, which also sounds pretty nasty. You can blitz him up the middle. You can trust him shooting the gap versus the run. You can trust him in zone, maybe even man coverage. He's kind of like the Derwin James of the first and second level, right? You can kind of move him around a lot, and that's exactly the kind of style that Brandon Staley wants to bring to the table. And what this does is vastly strengthen your DB-heavy looks, right? Your DB-heavy sets. If you're running, let's say, nickel or dime, right, which features just one inside linebacker over the middle, it theoretically provides excellent coverage, but it also kind of leaves you vulnerable to the run in most instances, right? Having one middle linebacker instead of two, there's going to be gaps that are unmanned. But with a guy like Roquan Smith, he'd help close the gap when considering those risks, right? If it is indeed a passing play, Roquan can run with the best of them in coverage. But if it's a run, let's say it's like a draw or something like that, right? Roquan gives you a much better chance at defending against that play, even with fewer players in the box. And this is why Roquan is such a big deal in his potential to the Chargers. He really might be the last piece of the puzzle. His presence would literally create an airtight defense that is almost impenetrable at every single level. And yes, he would likely vault the Chargers into a top 3 defense in the league conversation, maybe even the number 1 defense in the league. He wouldn't only boost one position group, but an entire part of the field as well. And that is why the Roquan hype is so strong with the Bolt fam right now. One last note that I wanted to throw in there too is adding a player like this who's only 25 years old, because that's him as a player, what he does for the team. But aside from that, only being 25 is a big, big deal. As with this particular team and their scheme, their personnel, wanting to run a lot of DBs, all that kind of stuff, his play over the middle would be extremely valuable going forward for very many years to come. He'd be an integral piece to creating consistency, not just now, but for the future. So kind of keep that in mind. So Roquan, no doubt that he would make a gigantic impact for the Chargers, patrolling the middle of the field, which again is the Chargers, let's say, last weak spot on the defense. Not even that weak, just definitely not as elite as the rest of the defense. So let's talk like scenarios a little bit, right? Let's talk trade first. Because the Bears are not just going to give him away, right? They're going to want something. So what do you want, Chicago? Well, first off, the Bears know that Roquan's a good player, right? And they're going to want a lot for him. I actually was reading in my research, a Bears beat writer suggests that the Chargers would offer not just our first and second round picks next season, but also Keenan Allen. Keep dreaming. I'm sorry. I don't know. I looked at that and I was like, man, you know what? It's fine. Let them have something, right? Just let them dream a little bit. In a perfect world, sure, the Bears might be able to, ask a king's ransom for a player like Roquan Smith. Unfortunately, coming back down to reality, there's just so many things working against the Bears in this situation, okay? For one, there's position value. He's not an edge rusher, unfortunately. He's an inside linebacker. Nobody's giving a first for a middle linebacker. I'm sorry, they just don't. Then there's the fact that Roquan himself wants out of Chicago. That's not good for the Bears either. We talk often about, how things can get skewed when a player declares that they want to go. There are very many cases when a player publicly declares they want to trade, which results in the former team getting shafted in terms of return value. Right? Remember the DeAndre Hopkins trade? The league's best wide receiver for a second-round pick and David Johnson? Maybe that's kind of a dramatic example, but we've seen shades of that almost every single season. And the Chargers were kind of an example of that early on this year with Khalil Mack. Lastly, there's their own position on Roquan Smith, just not even including, what he is, but also where they stand as a team. There's a reason that they don't want to pay him right now, right? Position value, state of the team, et cetera, but mostly, in my opinion, it's the uncertainty while switching to 4-3. Now, of course, the Bears want to know if Roquan can transition smoothly before committing, the big bucks, before they give him a big contract. But Roquan is looking for security now. You really cannot fault either side here. I think both sides do have stable ground to stand on, but it just creates a very unstable situation for both sides too. And this puts the Bears in a very tough spot. So in my opinion, just kind of taking a look at things, from a wide perspective here, I think the very, very most you can ask for Roquan Smith at this point is maybe a pair of second-round picks. And that's top dollar at this point, just from my perspective. Not even talking just for the Chargers, but any team that wants to grab Roquan. I think that's maybe at the very top shelf what you can ask. And sure, maybe there's a few teams that are willing to make that deal, but then again, maybe not, right? And it all stems from how every team values that position. Even Los Angeles, one of the teams, in terms of fit and need, Los Angeles does not value the position very highly. So it puts the Bears in a pretty tough spot in terms of what they would get in return if they were to trade away Roquan Smith. So I'm going to say a pair of seconds is like at the very highest what you can ask. Now let's talk a little bit about the cost, right? In terms of what you're going to offer Roquan Smith to stay on the team. Because let's say you do part with some draft picks. Now you got to pay the guy because he's not going to come somewhere to play one season and then have to go through this whole thing again. How much is Roquan looking for in terms of dollar value? Well, the last I heard in my reading is that he's looking for something in the realm of $15 million a year. And that is a lot of money, especially for the position. That would make him the third highest paid linebacker in the league. I would say inside linebacker in the league, behind Deion Jones and CJ Mosley. And honestly, again, for what he provides, it is kind of reasonable. But again, it really depends on how much you value his position. He needs to be able to be on the field a lot. His skill set needs to fit what you're doing, and the value needs to be there. The Chargers do kind of check all those boxes. But then comes the big question, the big thing that people keep asking me in terms of, director, what do you think? Can we pull this off? Do we even have the money to get Roquan Smith? Well, currently the Chargers have around $14 million in cap space, so that's kind of a good start, right? Short answer, I guess, yes. We do have the money to grab Roquan right now if we wanted to. With a few small moves, the Chargers could offer him even exactly what he's asking for. The issue, however, is not this year. Next year, that's when the cap, complications start presenting their, or turning their ugly heads a little bit. That's when things get a little complicated. The Chargers are projected to be around $20 million over the cap in 2023. That's kind of a big yikes. And this does complicate things in trying to sign more players right now. Because as of right now, our rollover, let's say the $14 million that we have this season, if we roll that over into next season, that takes, the over the cap situation down to a reasonable spot of about $6 million bucks. But our financial complications do not end there. Because we have, again, like I mentioned, some mega contracts on the table right now. One on the horizon, one on the table right now. And they 1,000,000% take priority today, right? Right now, these are the things we need to be focused on. Derwin is about to get paid. I think there's some people a little bit worried. Why is it taking so long? I think it's maybe even already happened and we're just waiting to hear, the final announcement. And he's going to account for something like $20 million a year. Derwin's going to be expensive, and he's a priority. Get that done right now before we even think about Roquan Smith. Then the Chargers have to start thinking and preparing themselves for Justin Herbert. He is going to be ridiculously expensive. But you know what? Worth every single penny. And you do not want to jeopardize any of that by signing another player right now. Does it make adding Roquan Smith this season impossible? No, it doesn't. I think money can be moved around. The cap is going to continue to grow. The Chargers could make this happen if they really wanted to. But it would make things complicated for a few years financially. What essentially would be doing is committing to these players for the next 4 years, which is not necessarily a bad thing if things pan out, right? But if things don't, it's not going to leave us a lot of financial wiggle room to kind of patch up those issues. But in a year where the Chargers are seemingly going all in, it's certainly a bold move that could pay huge, huge dividends. So short answer, yes, we can afford him. Moving around money, we could afford him. But in my opinion, you have to take priority over Derwin and Justin first. If you feel confident in that, then you can make a move on Roquan Smith. Now, lastly, a couple of things here. Let's do a very quick hypothetical trade as to not make this video too long. Hypothetical trade and salary. Okay, so first, I feel strongly that whoever gets Roquan Smith, the Chargers, another team, whatever, if he is traded, I feel they're going to get Roquan at a cost much lower than anybody expected, right? Because of all the complications that we've listed in this video. In this hypothetical, I'm going to run the numbers as such if the Chargers and the Bears do strike a deal. In this situation, I say the Los Angeles Chargers receive Roquan Smith and a 2024 5th or 6th round pick. Take your pick. Chicago would then receive the Chargers 2023 2nd round pick and the Chargers 2024 3rd round pick. So they're going to get 3 pretty high picks from the Chargers over the next 2 seasons for Roquan Smith and Khalil Mack, which is kind of crazy to think about, but that's kind of the situation that they're in. Or you could even consider a trade where the Chicago Bears receive, and I've given this one a lot of thought, Kenneth Murray and a 2024 3rd round pick. All right, now let me explain this one a little bit. I'm not really in the business right now of trading away Kenneth Murray because we don't really know his true stock yet. He had one bad season, one good season. We have to kind of wait and see what he turns into. But it does kind of solve a couple of problems here, doesn't it? Murray is a high upside linebacker that may end up fitting better in a 4-3. You never know. And his contract still has 2 years left on his rookie deal, with also the ability to add a 5th-year option if they need to. It kind of works out for Chicago, right? A straight-up linebacker-for-linebacker trade is rare, but in this case, it might work out for both parties. The Chargers, who, again, would put themselves in maybe a sticky situation financially, would get a linebacker that fits their system, familiarity, scheme, coaching familiarity, and most importantly, carries the talent that they need in an all-in season in 2022. So that's kind of why I threw the Kenneth Murray trade out there. It makes sense, I would say, very strongly for both sides, depending on how Chicago values a player like Kenneth Murray. So lastly, the biggest question I get asked all the time at the beginning of these videos in the comments is it going to happen? Well, I can't tell the future, right, guys? But I can give you my opinion on it, my perspective at least. I'm of the opinion that the Chargers will not be bidders in the Roquan Smith war, okay? Let me elaborate. As much as I love Roquan, right? And as much as I think he'd make just an enormous impact for this defense, really transform them into one of the best defenses in the league, I think the Chargers and their actions with Kaiser White really does speak volumes in terms of this situation, right? We let Kaiser White walk for a mere $3 million. And in the grand scheme of things in the NFL, that is nothing. Sure, Kaiser White wanted to play in Philadelphia. We have to take that into consideration. But nonetheless, the Chargers, if they valued coverage from the inside linebacker position, they may have made a bigger effort to keep him. And Kaiser, in terms of coverage, is definitely pretty good. Roquan, on the other hand, though, you do have to consider is definitely a better player all around. Definitely, no doubt about that. But is he $10 million better in terms of how the Chargers value the position? I'm not quite sure. I also believe that the whole situation as a whole, right? I believe that the pay me or trade me strategy is kind of being thrown around a lot lately. And sure, maybe we've seen plenty of situations where that actually does result in a trade. But I also think that this is maybe being used by Roquan to try and stay in Chicago and grab an extension there. It's not a bad strategy to exercise in today's NFL. And if I were a betting man, I would say that he does stay with the Bears. But he's also offered himself a backup option in the event that the Bears are too stubborn to offer him an extension. Still, I really, honestly, guys, I cannot take the Chargers completely out of the conversation yet, though, because of the ridiculous amount of connections that he does have to LA. But I would say the chances are relatively low. They're still open, but maybe a little bit low. And that's probably mainly due to our financial restraint. If it weren't for that, I think the Chargers would definitely be pretty big players in this Roquan situation. Still, you never know. I would put us at maybe about 15%. If he does get traded, I think it's about 15% that he ends up with the Chargers because of those connections. So lastly, the last thing I'll say in this video to kind of wrap things up, the answer to my question at the top of the video. What was the question? Actually, let me read it again. Oh, yeah. How much would I be willing to give up for Roquan, and how much would I be willing to pay him? At this point, I personally think that the draft compensation wouldn't be too serious. Again, very situational. I think it does drive his price down quite a bit. I think the Chargers could, figure out a deal that involves maybe a second-round pick and a player like Kenneth Murray, right? If they have to go that high, I can kind of see that happening. His money figure, though, is my biggest holdup. I would personally be willing to trade or to pay Roquan Smith in the realm of like $12 million, maybe $13.5. You could maybe talk me into $14 million. Let's go ahead and cut it down to like $13.5 million annually. I think that's kind of where I stand at the very, very most, because it might not even be enough to get Roquan to move, but I think it's the most that we can do while not risking extensions for Derwin and Herbert at this present time. And even if he does take the offer, it's definitely pricey, but well worth the investment if the Chargers are convinced that they need inside linebacker help, especially in a year that they're going all in. Still, if Roquan wants anything in the range of, let's say he goes crazy, he wants $20 million a year, I think we may need to put our hopes of seeing him in powder blue to rest. Because in the end, again, the Chargers would be much bigger players in this bidding war if it weren't for their financial restraint. Because I guarantee you, Brandon Staley opened his phone, he saw Roquan wants out, and immediately he started thinking about how much he would love to see him in powder blue. But I do think at this point the Chargers are facing some financial restrictions, so we'll have to wait and see. Well, guys, let me know in the comment section below what you think of this entire Roquan Smith situation. If you'd be willing to throw down the gauntlet, really go all in, put ourselves in maybe a little bit of a financial, complicated situation for the next couple of years in order to make it happen, but with the mentality of going all in, it certainly could pay off. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. If you liked what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. We'll see you next time, and as always, bolt up and stay frosty. Not even kidding. Probably propel top 3 defense, very minimum to me. That would make a huge, huge difference.